I gave my house to my son so he could start his family. A month later, he changed the locks and blocked me on his phone. Mom, you can stay in the garage if you want. I won the lottery on Monday. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought I'd find myself homeless at 64. That's not something you plan for or expect, especially when your only son is the one who puts you out on the street. My name is Stephany, and until a month ago, I owned a small 3-bedroom house in Cedar Falls. It wasn't fancy, just a simple home with faded yellow siding and a porch where I'd spent countless evenings watching the neighborhood change over 30 years. I'd paid off that mortgage by working double shifts at my small tailoring shop, sometimes sewing until my fingers bled, determined to provide stability for Isaac after his father left us when he was just 7. It all changed when Isaac and his wife Melissa announced they were expecting their first child. The joy in my son's eyes made my heart swell. I was going to be a grandmother. That evening, as we celebrated with a bottle of sparkling cider, Isaac mentioned how they'd been struggling to find an affordable place with enough room for a nursery. The housing market is brutal right now, Mom, he sighed, his hand protectively covering Melissa's still flat stomach. We might have to move to the other side of town, away from both our jobs. I didn't hesitate. You should take this house, I offered. I've been thinking about downsizing anyway. The words left my mouth before I'd fully considered what they meant, but seeing Isaac's expression, a mixture of disbelief and relief, convinced me it was the right decision. I told myself I could find a small apartment, maybe even one of those senior living communities I'd heard about. Melissa hugged me, tears streaming down her face. You're an angel, Stephany. I promise we'll make a beautiful nursery in your old sewing room. Within 2 weeks, I'd signed over the deed. The lawyer had suggested I retain some legal protection, perhaps a life estate, or at minimum a formal rental agreement. But I brushed off his concerns. This is my son we're talking about, I'd said confidently. We don't need formal arrangements. The plan was simple. I would stay in the guest bedroom temporarily while looking for my own place. I even sold my tailoring shop to have extra money for the move. We all agreed it was a perfect transition. They got their family home, and I had time to find somewhere suitable without rushing. The first few days were wonderful. We cooked together, talked about nursery colors, and laughed about how the baby would have my stubborn chin and Isaac's curious eyes. I felt needed and valued. But then, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. It started with Melissa rearranging the kitchen, moving my special teacups to the back of a high cabinet I couldn't reach. We need the accessible space for things we use daily, she explained when I asked about it. Her tone was practical, reasonable. How could I argue? Next, I noticed my morning routine seemed to irritate them. Mom, could you maybe not use the kitchen until after 8? Isaac asked one day. Melissa's morning sickness makes her sensitive to food smells. I adjusted, eating breakfast later, taking shorter showers, making myself scarce during what became their time. My world slowly shrank to the confines of the guest bedroom, where I spent more hours each day, tiptoeing through what was once my own home. 3 weeks after I'd signed away my house, I returned from grocery shopping to find Melissa rearranging the guest room, my temporary bedroom. I hope you don't mind, she said, not looking up as she measured the window. We might need this as a second nursery if we have another baby soon. I'm just planning ahead. But where would I stay? I asked, my grocery bag still in hand. She turned to me, her expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. Oh, we'll figure something out by then. Maybe the pull-out couch? Anyway, it's not immediate. That night, I heard them arguing in hushed tones. She's been here longer than we discussed, Melissa whispered sharply. Does she even have a plan to leave? What am I supposed to do? Isaac responded. She gave us the house. I can't just kick her out. You're about to be a father. Your priority should be us, your family. The silence that followed broke something in me. In Isaac's mind, I was no longer family. The next morning, I bought a lottery ticket, something I rarely did. Perhaps it was desperation or a silent plea to the universe. I tucked it into my wallet and forgot about it, too preoccupied with the growing tension in what used to be my home. That evening, as I sat alone in the guest room, staring at rental listings I couldn't afford, I heard a knock. Isaac entered without waiting for my response. "Mom?" he began, his voice eerily calm. "Melissa and I have been talking." My heart sank as I recognized the expression on his face, the same one he wore as a teenager when he was about to deliver. Bad news? Some maternal instincts never fade. "We need to establish some boundaries," he continued. "This arrangement was supposed to be temporary." I felt the floor drop beneath me as Isaac continued, his words cutting deeper than any knife could. "Melissa needs space. Her doctor says stress isn't good for the baby, and he hesitated. Having another person in the house is adding pressure she doesn't need right now." "Another person?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm your mother, Isaac." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "You know what I mean, Mom. It's just, we need our own space to become parents, to create our own family traditions." I nodded mechanically, tears threatening to spill. "I understand. I'll step up my apartment hunting. Maybe I can find something by the end of the month?" Isaac shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Melissa's parents are coming next weekend to help with the nursery. We were hoping you could find something sooner." My hands trembled as reality crashed down. "Sooner? As in days?" "I know it's sudden," he said, finally looking at me with what appeared to be genuine regret. "But we need to start fresh." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I need a little time, Isaac. Just a week or two. I sold my shop. Everything I had went into this house. Your house now." He stood abruptly. "I'll talk to Melissa, see if we can work something out." But his tone made it clear there would be no negotiation. That night, I barely slept. How had it come to this? I'd devoted my life to giving my son everything I could, worked my fingers raw, ensuring he never went without. Now, at 64, I was being discarded like an outdated appliance, functional enough, but no longer wanted. The next morning, I went to the bank to check if I had enough savings for a security deposit on even the smallest apartment. The numbers weren't encouraging. As I walked home, a place that no longer felt like home, I remembered the lottery ticket. Might as well check, I thought, stopping at the convenience store. I handed my ticket to the clerk, a young man with kind eyes who scanned it casually. "Huh," he said, his eyebrows shooting up. "You might want to hold on to this, ma'am. You need to claim this one at the lottery office." My heart skipped. "What do you mean? You've won something significant. I can't tell you how much, but it's more than we can pay out here." I stumbled out of the store in a daze, the ticket clutched tightly in my hand. Could it be possible? Had luck finally found me when I needed it most? When I returned to the house, something felt different. The air was heavier, charged with unspoken tension. Melissa was waiting in the living room, arms crossed over her growing belly. "We need to talk," she said, her voice cold. For the next 15 minutes, she outlined how uncomfortable my presence made her, how she needed to nest without feeling watched, how Isaac was stressed trying to manage everyone's feelings. Not once did she acknowledge that this had been my home for 3 decades, or that I had nowhere else to go. "We think it's best if you find other arrangements immediately," she concluded. "Isaac's too soft to say it, but this isn't working." I sat frozen, the lottery ticket burning a hole in my purse. "I need a few days," I pleaded. "Just until the weekend." Her eyes narrowed. "Fine, but no longer." The next 2 days were a blur of desperate phone calls to apartments I couldn't afford and old friends who had no room. I hid the lottery ticket. In a small slit I cut in the lining of my purse, afraid to tell anyone until I knew exactly what I'd won. On Thursday, I had a doctor's appointment for my arthritis. When I returned to the house, my heart stopped. My belongings, photo albums, clothes, my sewing machine, were piled haphazardly in the garage. Isaac stood in the driveway, keys in hand, his expression a mix of shame and determination. "What's happening?" I asked, though I already knew. "Melissa had an anxiety attack this morning," he said flatly. "Her doctor says she needs absolute calm." "So you're putting me in the garage?" My voice broke as I stared at the boxes. "It's temporary, Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Just until you find a place. We set up the old camping cot and a space heater." He paused. "You have the garage door opener. You can come and go without disturbing us." "Isaac," I whispered, "I'm your mother. I changed your diapers. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. How can you do this?" Something hardened in his face. "I need to think about my child now, Mom. My family." The words sliced through my heart. I was no longer his family. "I need to get some things from inside," I said. Moving toward the door, he stepped in my path. "I'll get whatever you need. My medication is on the nightstand, and my address book is in the drawer." I fought to keep my voice steady. "Wait here." When he disappeared inside, I sank against my car, knees weak. How had my son become this person? What had I done wrong? After Isaac brought my things, I decided to clear my head with a walk. I couldn't face the reality of sleeping in my own garage just yet. I walked for hours, until my arthritic knees ached and the sun began to set. When I returned, my garage door opener didn't work. I tried the house key I still carried out of habit. No luck. The locks had been changed. I knocked on the front door. No answer, though I could see lights on inside. I called Isaac's cell phone repeatedly. Straight to voicemail. Finally, I sent a text. "Isaac, please let me in. It's getting cold." The response came moments later. "Not a good time. Melissa needs rest." I couldn't believe what I was reading. "I have nowhere to go," I typed with trembling fingers. After 5 excruciating minutes. "Figure something out. We need space." As night fell, I tried one more desperate call. That's when I discovered he'd blocked my number. Standing in the darkness outside what used to be my home, holding nothing but my purse and a small bag of medications, I realized the devastating truth. I was homeless at 64, abandoned by my only child. I stood there, paralyzed with shock, staring at the dark house that had been my home for 3 decades. The windows that once welcomed me now looked like cold, judging eyes. My body felt numb, my mind struggling to process this new reality. What does a 64-year-old woman with arthritis and no immediate shelter do at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night? The temperature was dropping, a spring chill settling in the air. I clutched my purse tighter, feeling the outline of the lottery ticket hidden inside, a secret lifeline I wasn't even sure of yet. With trembling hands, I opened my car door and sat inside, turning the heat on low to conserve gas. I couldn't afford to waste fuel when I had no idea where my next dollar would come from. My phone battery showed 23%, not enough to search for hotels I couldn't afford anyway. I scrolled through my contacts, the names blurring through my tears. Who could I call? Most of my friends were struggling themselves, living on fixed incomes or dealing with health issues. I couldn't burden them with my problems. As the night grew darker, I made a decision. I drove to the 24-hour Walmart parking lot where overnight, parking was tolerated. I'd read about this in a newspaper article about the housing crisis, never imagining I'd find myself counting on such knowledge. Reclining my seat as far as it would go, I covered myself with the light jacket I'd been wearing and tried to sleep. Every sound startled me. Car doors slamming, voices passing by, the occasional security vehicle making rounds. I dozed fitfully, waking with a stiff neck and swollen knees as dawn broke. In the harsh morning light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, a tired woman with disheveled gray hair and red-rimmed eyes. "Pull yourself together, Stephany," I whispered to myself. "You've survived worse." Had I, though? Even when Isaac's father left us with nothing but debts, we still had a roof over our heads. Even when business was slow at the tailoring shop, I still had my dignity. Now what did I have? The lottery ticket I needed to know. I drove to the state lottery office, arriving just as they opened at 8:30 a.m. My hands shook as I presented my ticket and ID to the clerk, a woman about my age with kind eyes and a name tag that read Patricia. "Please take a seat, Mrs. Wilson," she said after examining my ticket. "Someone will be with you shortly." 20 minutes later, I was ushered into a small office where a man in a crisp suit introduced himself as Mr. Reynolds, the claims manager. "Mrs. Wilson," he began, his tone professional but warm. "I'm pleased to inform you that you've won quite a significant prize." He slid a paper across the desk. "After taxes, this is what you'll receive." I stared at the number, certain I was misreading. $2,147,191, nearly $3 million. "Is this?" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Yes, ma'am. You're our newest millionaire." He smiled, explaining the payout options: lump sum versus annuity, tax considerations, financial advisory services. But I barely heard him. All I could think was, yesterday, my son put me out on the street, and today, I have enough money to buy 10 houses better than the one I gave him. The irony wasn't lost on me. After completing the necessary paperwork, Mr. Reynolds informed me that it would take about 2 weeks to process everything and transfer the funds. "In the meantime," he advised, "I suggest you keep this information private and consult with a financial advisor." I nodded, still dazed, and stepped out into the morning sunshine with nothing but a claim receipt and the promise of wealth that seemed unreal. But wealth meant nothing without shelter for tonight. With my phone battery critically low, I drove to a small diner I'd noticed earlier. I ordered the cheapest coffee on the menu and asked if I could charge my phone. The waitress, her name tag, read Jenny, smiled sympathetically at my disheveled appearance. "Rough night?" she asked, bringing me a full pot of coffee instead of just a cup. Something in her kindness broke the dam I'd been building inside. Before I could stop myself, tears were streaming down my face. "Oh, honey," Jenny said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Whatever it is, it'll be okay." And so, to this stranger with kind eyes, I told my story. About giving my house to Isaac, about being relegated to the garage, about being locked out and blocked by my only child. I kept the lottery win to myself. That seemed prudent given my vulnerable situation. "You poor thing," Jenny said when I'd finished. "Do you have anywhere to go?" I shook my head, embarrassed by my helplessness. "Let me make a call," she said, standing up. "I know someone who might be able to help." 20 minutes later, as I was finishing my second cup of coffee, the diner door opened, and a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair walked in, scanning. The room before Jenny pointed in my direction. She approached my table with purpose, her eyes appraising me without judgment. "I'm Nancy," she said, extending her hand. "Jenny tells me you need a place to stay." I took her hand, noticing the calluses that spoke of a life of hard work. "Stephany Wilson," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "And yes, I find myself in a difficult situation." Nancy nodded, sitting down across from me. Jenny explained some of it. "I run a small boarding house on Maple Street. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. I have a room that's been empty for a few weeks. It's yours if you want it." My pride wanted to refuse, to insist I could manage on my own. But the practical part of me, the part that had spent the night in a Walmart parking lot, knew better. "I don't have much money right now," I admitted, "but I'm expecting some funds in about 2 weeks. I could pay you then." Nancy studied me for a moment. "Tell you what," she said finally. "The room needs new curtains and the quilts could use mending. I noticed your hands. They look like a seamstress's hands. You help me with those things, and we'll call it even until your funds come through." Relief washed over me like a warm wave. "I was a tailor for 30 years, I said, feeling a flicker of my old confidence. "I can definitely help with that." Nancy smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Then it sounds like we have a deal." Nancy's boarding house was a large Victorian home with faded blue paint and a wide front porch lined with mismatched rocking chairs. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and had a certain charm that reminded me of my grandmother's home from childhood. "This is the common area," Nancy explained as we entered a spacious living room with well-worn furniture. "Kitchen's through there. Everyone has their own labeled shelf in the fridge. Breakfast is communal if you want to join, but it's not required." She led me upstairs to a small but tidy room with a twin bed, dresser, and a window overlooking the backyard garden. Bathrooms shared with one other tenant, Mrs. Henderson. She's 72 and quiet as a mouse. Shower before 7 a.m. or after 9 a.m. to avoid her schedule. Nancy handed me a key. "Laundry's in the basement, $1 per load. Any questions?" I shook my head, overwhelmed by her matter-of-fact kindness. "Good. Get settled then. Dinner's at 6 if you want to join us." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Stephany? Whatever happened with your son? That's his failing, not yours." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, allowing myself a moment to process everything. In 24 hours, I'd gone from homeless to having shelter, from desperate to becoming a millionaire, a secret millionaire living in a boarding house. Life had a strange sense of humor. I spent that first afternoon helping Nancy mend quilts, grateful for the familiar comfort of needle and thread in my hands. The work kept my mind occupied, preventing it from dwelling on Isaac's betrayal. The other tenants, 3 elderly women and a middle-aged man, were polite but respectful of privacy, asking no prying questions at dinner. That night, I slept better than expected, exhaustion outweighing my anxiety. The next morning, I made an appointment with a financial advisor recommended by the lottery office and began researching affordable apartments online using Nancy's shared computer. I needed to be strategic about my windfall, making decisions with my head rather than my freshly wounded heart. 3 days into my stay, while measuring fabric for new curtains in the common room, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mom, it's Isaac. I'm using Melissa's phone. We need to talk. I'm worried about you." My hands froze mid-cut. Now he was worried? After changing the locks and blocking my number? Another text followed. "Please let me know you're safe. I've called the police, but they won't file a missing persons report yet." A cold realization washed over me. He wasn't worried about my welfare. He was worried about how this looked to others. What would the neighbors think of a son whose elderly mother had vanished? How would he explain this to family friends? I set down the scissors, considering my response. Part of me wanted to ignore him completely, to let him stew in the consequences of his actions. But another part, the mother who had raised him, who remembered the sweet boy he'd once been, couldn't be that cruel. After careful thought, I wrote back, "I am safe. Do not contact me again until you're ready to apologize properly." His response came immediately. "Where are you staying? Do you need money?" Money. Of course, that would be his solution. Throw cash at the problem he created. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another text. "Mom, please. Melissa feels terrible." "We both do. Come home and we can work this out." Home. The word stung. That house wasn't my home anymore. He'd made that abundantly clear. I typed simply, "No." Nancy found me an hour later, still sitting with the half-cut fabric in my lap, staring at my phone. "Trouble?" she asked, settling into the chair opposite mine. I hesitated, then showed her the text exchange. She read it silently, her expression darkening. "Men," she finally said, handing the phone back. "They mess up catastrophically, then expect forgiveness at the first sign of remorse." She studied my face. "What will you do?" "Nothing," I said firmly. "At least not now. When my money comes through and I have my own place, maybe we can talk. But on my terms, not his." Nancy nodded approvingly. "Good for you." Over the next week, I fell into a routine at the boarding house. Mornings were spent sewing, afternoons researching my future options, evenings sharing meals with my temporary housemates. I discovered Nancy had her own story of family betrayal. A sister who had contested their mother's will, resulting in a decade-long estrangement. "Blood isn't always thicker than water," she told me one evening as we washed dishes. Together. "Sometimes the family you choose is more reliable than the one you're born into." 12 days after my visit to the lottery office, I received the call I'd been waiting for. My funds had been transferred to my newly established account. I was officially a millionaire. That afternoon, I met with Mr. Daniels, the financial advisor I'd selected after careful research. He was a serious man in his 50s who specialized in helping sudden wealth recipients make sound decisions. "The key is to move methodically," he advised as we reviewed my options. "No major purchases for at least 3 months. Let's establish a conservative investment portfolio, set up a trust, and consider tax-efficient charitable giving." I nodded, appreciating his measured approach. "What about housing?" "Renting is smartest initially," he suggested. "Give yourself time to decide where you truly want to settle before buying." By the end of our 2-hour meeting, I had a clear financial roadmap and a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions solely for myself, not sacrificing for others or compromising to keep peace. That evening, as I helped Nancy prepare dinner, I broached the subject of my departure. "I'll be looking at apartments next week," I told her, chopping carrots for the stew. "I can't thank you enough for everything." Nancy waved away my gratitude. "You've been good company and your sewing saved me a fortune. But I'm glad you're landing on your feet." She stirred the pot thoughtfully. "Any plans to contact your son once you're settled?" I sighed, setting down the knife. "I don't know. Part of me wants to show up in a luxury car, flash my bank statement, and watch his face when he realizes what he threw away." I felt ashamed even saying it aloud. "But that's just hurt talking." Nancy nodded understandingly. "Revenge fantasies are normal. Acting on them rarely brings satisfaction." "The truth is," I admitted, "I'm still his mother. I still love him despite everything. But I can't go back to how things were. I need to figure out who I am now. Stephany the person, not just Isaac's mother or the woman who gave away her house." "That," Nancy said approvingly, "sounds like the beginning of wisdom." 2 days later, Isaac escalated his attempts to contact me. He showed up at the boarding house, having somehow tracked me down, likely through a mutual acquaintance I'd updated about my whereabouts. I was in the kitchen helping Mrs. Henderson reach a high shelf when Nancy appeared in the doorway, her expression tense. "Stephany," she said quietly, "your son is at the front door." My heart lurched painfully in my chest. "Did you tell him I'm here?" I said I needed to check if you were accepting visitors. Nancy's eyes were steady. "It's your call. I can send him away if you're not ready." Mrs. Henderson squeezed my arm gently. "Whatever you decide, dear, we're right behind you." I took a deep breath, smoothing down my shirt, a second-hand blouse I'd bought at the thrift store down the street. "I'll see him on the porch, not inside." Nancy nodded approvingly. "Good boundaries." As I walked to the front door, My legs felt leaden. Through the lace curtains, I could see Isaac pacing on the porch, checking his watch repeatedly. He looked disheveled, unshaven, his normally meticulous hair uncombed. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of satisfaction that he appeared to be suffering. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. Isaac. He spun around, relief washing over his face. Mom! Thank God. I've been so worried. I didn't move toward him, keeping my distance. Why are you here? His face fell at my cool tone. To bring you home, of course. This is ridiculous. You staying in some boarding house. He glanced dismissively at the building behind me. Look, Melissa and I talked it over. You can have the guest room back until you find a place. The audacity nearly took my breath away. Until I find a place? Like I'm some charity case you're generously accommodating? That's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Mom, be reasonable. You can't live here. What will people think? And there it was, his true concern. Not my welfare, but appearances. I don't care what people think, Isaac, and neither should you. This is insane, he muttered. Just come home. We made a mistake, okay? We were stressed about the baby and Melissa was hormonal and— Stop. My voice cut through his excuses, like a knife. You locked me out, Isaac. You put my things in the garage and changed the locks. You blocked my number. He had the decency to look ashamed. I know, and I'm sorry. It was wrong. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. You made me homeless at 64 years old after I gave you everything. Not everything, he scoffed before he could stop himself. You've always held on to your money like it might disappear. Always calculating, always keeping track of who owes what. I stared at him, stunned by this unfair characterization. I worked 16-hour days at that tailoring shop to put you through college, Isaac. I never took vacations. I wore the same winter coat for 15 years so you could have the best I could provide. And you never let me forget it, he snapped, a familiar bitterness surfacing. Every sacrifice, every penny spent, it was always there, hanging over my head. You think I don't know what you gave up for me? You reminded me constantly. His words hit me like a physical blow. Was that how he saw me? As some martyr who weaponized my sacrifices? That was never my intention, I said quietly. Wasn't it? He looked skeptical. Then why did every conversation eventually circle back? To how hard you worked, how much you did for me? I opened my mouth to deny it, then closed it again. Had I done that? Had my pride in providing for him somehow morphed into a burden I placed on his shoulders? We stood in silence, the weight of decades of misunderstandings hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. Even if that were true, Isaac, it doesn't justify what you did. He looked away. I know. He trailed off, then tried again. Melissa's parents have always given her everything without strings attached. When they help us, they don't keep bringing it up. The comparison stung, but I forced myself to consider it objectively. Had I attached strings to my generosity without realizing it? I never meant to make you feel indebted, I said softly. I was just proud of what I could provide, despite our circumstances. Isaac's posture softened slightly. I know you sacrificed a lot, Mom, but sometimes it felt like you wanted me to feel guilty for accepting what you offered. We were getting nowhere, rehashing old wounds instead of addressing the immediate breach of trust. That's something we can discuss another time, I said firmly. It doesn't excuse locking me out of the house I gave you. You're right. He ran a hand across his face. I handled it terribly. But please come back with me. We can work this out. I shook my head. No, Isaac, I'm not coming back. Mom, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I interrupted. For perhaps the first time in my life where you're concerned, I'm putting my needs first. His expression hardened. So you're just going to stay in this place? With strangers? These strangers showed me more kindness in 2 weeks than you have in months. I gestured toward the house. Nancy took me in when I had nowhere to go, when my own son put me out on the street. I didn't put you on the street, he protested. I offered you the garage. The absurdity of his defense hung in the air between us. Even he seemed to realize how it sounded. Mom, he tried again, his voice softer. Please, I made a terrible mistake. Let me fix it. For a moment, I wavered. This was my son, the baby I'd nursed, the child I'd raised alone, the young man whose accomplishments had filled me with such pride. Despite everything, I loved him. But then I remembered the cold text. Figure something out. We need space. I remembered standing outside in the dark, realizing I had been discarded. I forgive you, Isaac, I said finally. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll put myself in position to be hurt by you again. So that's it? His voice rose. One mistake and you're done with me? I didn't say I was done with you. I said, I'm not coming back to that house. Where will you go then? He gestured at the boarding house dismissively. You can't stay here forever. I smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. I have plans. What plans? Mom, be realistic. Your savings can't last long and you sold your business. I considered telling him about the lottery win, watching his expression change as he realized what he'd thrown away. But Nancy's words came back to me. Revenge fantasies are normal. Acting on them rarely brings satisfaction. I'll be fine, I said instead. I'm more capable than you give me credit for. He studied me for a long moment, seeming to notice something different in my demeanor. A newfound confidence, perhaps. This isn't like you, he said finally. You've always put family first. I still do, I replied. But I've realized that I'm part of that family too. My needs matter as well. 3 weeks after my conversation with Isaac on Nancy's porch, I stood in the living room of my new home, hardly believing it was mine. The 2-bedroom cottage had a bay window overlooking a small garden, hardwood floors that gleamed in the morning light, and most importantly, a deed with only my name on it. Mr. Daniels, my financial advisor, had helped me make a sensible purchase. Not too extravagant, but far nicer than anywhere I'd lived before. I'd paid cash, invested the majority of my winnings conservatively, and set aside funds for home improvements and a comfortable monthly income. Nancy helped me move in, bringing a housewarming gift of homemade curtains for the kitchen windows. It's perfect for you, she said, looking around approvingly. Small enough to manage, but room for your sewing studio. I'd decided to return to tailoring, not as a business this time, but as a passion project. The 2nd bedroom was being converted into a sewing room with top-of-the-line equipment, a luxury I'd never afforded myself during my working years. I can't thank you enough for everything, I told Nancy, serving tea in mismatched cups I'd found at an estate sale. You saved me when I had nothing. She waved away my gratitude. You saved yourself, Stephany. I just provided a temporary landing spot. That night, after Nancy left, I sat in my new living room, savoring the quiet that belonged only to me. No walking on eggshells, no navigating another person's moods, no shifting to accommodate someone else's priorities. Just peace. I still hadn't told Isaac about the lottery win or my new home. Our relationship remained strained, limited to brief text exchanges every few days. He'd stopped pushing for me to return, perhaps finally accepting that I meant what I said about boundaries. The doorbell rang the following Saturday afternoon as I was organizing fabric for a quilt I planned to make. Through the peephole, I saw Isaac standing on my porch, a bouquet of flowers in hand. My heart raced as I opened the door. How did you find me? He looked startled by my abrupt greeting. Hello to you too, Mom. Nancy gave me your address. I made a mental note to have a conversation with Nancy about sharing my information, even with family. "May I come in?" he asked, extending the flowers. I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Briefly, I have plans later." A small lie, but one that gave me control over the length of this unexpected visit. Isaac entered cautiously, his eyes widening as he took in the tasteful furnishings, the sunlit space, the obvious quality of my new home. "This is nice," he said, clearly bewildered. "How did you afford this place?" I took the flowers and headed to the kitchen for a vase. "I have my resources." He followed me, his confusion mounting. "Mom, seriously, this doesn't make sense. You were staying at a boarding house, and now suddenly you own a house in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town? Did you take out a mortgage? At your age? I don't owe you financial explanations, Isaac." I arranged the flowers deliberately, giving myself time to decide how much to reveal. "Is it a rental? Because if you signed something without having a lawyer look at it—" "I own it outright," I interrupted, tired of his assumptions about my competence. "No mortgage." He stared at me, visibly struggling to make sense of this information. "That's not possible. Unless—" His eyes narrowed. "Did you have money saved that you never told me about? Even when we were struggling with the down payment on the house?" The accusation in his tone made my decision for me. "I won the lottery," I said simply. His expression froze. "What?" "The day after you locked me out, I discovered my lottery ticket was worth nearly $3 million. The blood drained from his face as the implications sank in. $3 million, and you were homeless because of me." I nodded, feeling no satisfaction from his obvious distress. Life has a strange sense of timing. He sank onto a kitchen chair, looking shell-shocked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would it have mattered?" I asked genuinely. "Would you have wanted me back for me or for my money?" His silence was answer enough. "That's why I didn't tell you," I said softly. "I needed to know who I could trust, who valued me for myself." "And you couldn't trust your own son." His voice was hollow. "You gave me reason not to." We sat in heavy silence for several minutes, the magnitude of what had been lost hanging between us. Finally, Isaac spoke, his voice small. "I really messed up, didn't I?" For the first time since he'd arrived, I felt a genuine softening toward him. "Yes, you did. But mistakes don't have to be permanent." "What does that mean?" I considered my words carefully. "It means I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but it will take time, and it will never be what it was before." "Because you don't need me anymore," he said bitterly. "You're rich now." "No," I corrected him. "Because I've realized my worth isn't tied to what I can provide for others. I matter for myself, not just as your mother or a financial safety net." He looked up, his eyes damp. "I never meant to make you feel like that was all you were to me." "But you did," I said gently. "Actions speak louder than words, Isaac." He nodded, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "Where do we go from here?" "That depends on you," I said honestly. "I've established my boundaries. I have my own life now. If you want to be part of it, you'll need to respect that." "And Melissa?" he asked hesitantly. "That's more complicated," I admitted. "She'll need to make amends in her own way if she wants a relationship with me. How is she doing with the pregnancy?" 7 months now, he said. "It's a boy. My first grandchild, a boy." Despite everything, I felt a flutter of joy at the thought. "I hope you'll let me meet him when he arrives," I said. "Of course," Isaac replied quickly. "You're his grandmother." I nodded, appreciating the acknowledgement. "But I won't be babysitting in that house." He winced, but didn't argue. "Fair enough." As he was leaving an hour later, Isaac paused at the door. "Mom, I am sorry. Truly." "I know," I said, and I did. My son wasn't malicious, just immature and easily influenced. We'll figure it out one day at a time. After he left, I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. 6 weeks ago, I had been standing outside the house I'd given away, homeless and heartbroken. Now I was sitting in my own home, financially secure, finally understanding my own worth. The lottery win had changed my circumstances, certainly, but the real transformation had been internal. Learning to value myself, to establish boundaries, to build a life centered on my own needs rather than everyone else's. My phone buzzed with a text from Nancy. How did it go with Isaac? I smiled, grateful for her concern. Better than expected, baby steps. She replied immediately, remember, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not them. Wise Nancy. She'd become more than a temporary landlady. She was now a trusted friend, someone who'd seen me at my lowest and helped me find my strength. I set my phone down and picked up the quilt pieces I'd been organizing earlier. With steady hands, I began sewing them together, creating something new and beautiful from separate fragments, much like I was doing with my life. Tomorrow, I'd start volunteering at the senior center downtown, sharing my sewing skills with others. Next month, I plan to take a cooking class I'd always been interested in, and in the fall, perhaps I'd finally take that trip to the Grand Canyon I'd been dreaming of for decades. For the first time in my life, my future was entirely my own to shape. No one's expectations to meet, no one's approval to seek, no one's needs prioritized above my own. Isaac would remain part of my life. He was my son, after all, and soon I'd have a grandson to love. But our relationship would be healthier now, built on mutual respect rather than obligation and sacrifice. As for Melissa, time would tell. Perhaps becoming a mother would soften her heart. Perhaps not. Either way, I no longer needed her acceptance or approval. I was Stephany Wilson, mother, soon-to-be grandmother, seamstress, lottery winner. But most importantly, I was finally, truly myself. Though evening light faded outside my window as I continued sewing, my heart full with the knowledge that sometimes the end of one story is simply the beginning of a better one. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving. On the final screen, 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.